The Miami sun filtered through the blinds of the sprawling estate in a way that used to feel comforting. Now it only illuminated the dust particles floating in air that felt too still, too quiet. Barry Gibb sat in the music room, his hands resting on his knees, staring at the grand piano that hadn't been touched in months. The house had always been filled with sound, laughter echoing from the kitchen, Linda's voice calling from the garden, music drifting from every corner. Now there was nothing but the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of palm trees outside. He looked around the room. Gold records lined the walls. Photographs captured moments of triumph. The three brothers on stage, arms around each other, smiles that could light up stadiums. But those images felt like they belonged to someone else now. Some other version of Barry who still had brothers to call, a wife to come home to, a reason to write another song. "You should eat something," came a gentle voice from the doorway. Barry turned to see his son Stephen standing there, concern etched across his face. Stephen had been coming by every day since the funeral, checking in, making sure his father was still functioning. Barry appreciated it, even if he couldn't always show it. "I'm not hungry," Barry said, his voice hoarse from disuse. Stephen stepped into the room, his footsteps careful, as if afraid to disturb the fragile atmosphere. "Dad, you can't keep doing this. Sitting in here all day, not talking to anyone. What would you have me do?" Barry's words came out sharper than intended. He softened his tone. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do with myself anymore." Stephen sat down on the piano bench, running his fingers along the keys without pressing them. "Uncle Robin would tell you to play. Uncle Maurice would tell you to have a drink and tell stories. And Mom," his voice caught slightly, "Mom would tell you that hiding from the world isn't the answer." Barry felt his throat tighten. Linda had been gone for 8 months now. The cancer had taken her quickly, brutally. And before he'd even begun to process that loss, he was still carrying the weight of losing Maurice in 2003 and Robin in 2012. The Bee Gees, the name that had meant everything, that had been his identity since he was a teenager, existed now only in memory. "Your mother knew me better than anyone," Barry said quietly. "She knew that without the music, without them, I'm just lost." "You're not lost, Dad. You're grieving. There's a difference." Barry stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the Florida landscape stretched out in brilliant greens and blues. Boats dotted the Biscayne Bay, people going about their lives as if the world hadn't fundamentally shifted. He supposed for them, it hadn't. "When we were kids in Manchester," Barry began, his accent thickening slightly with the memory, "before we moved to Australia, before any of this, we used to harmonize in our bedroom. Maurice, Robin and me, we'd make up songs about nothing, just to hear our voices blend together." He turned back to Stephen. "That's when I was happiest, when it was just about the music, about being together." "You can still make music," Stephen offered. "Can I?" Barry's laugh was bitter. "Every song I've ever written has been shaped by them. Every melody had Maurice's bass line in my head, Robin's harmony. How do I create something when half of me is missing?" Stephen stood, approaching his father carefully. "You do it the same way you're getting through each day. One note at a time. One word at a time." Barry wanted to believe him. He wanted to feel that spark again, that urgent need to create that had driven him his entire life. But right now, all he felt was exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd said too many goodbyes. His phone buzzed on the table, another message of condolence probably, or another request for an interview about Linda, about the legacy of the Bee Gees, about how it felt to be the last one standing. He ignored it. "I think I'll take a walk," Barry said suddenly, surprising himself as much as Stephen. "Want company?" "No, thank you. But I need to clear my head." Stephen nodded, understanding. "I'll be here when you get back. And Dad? It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to be strong all the time." Barry squeezed his son's shoulder, unable to find words, and headed for the door. Outside, the Miami heat hit him immediately, heavy and humid. He started walking down the long driveway, past the manicured lawns and flowering bushes that Linda had loved. His feet carried him automatically toward the gate, toward the street beyond. As he walked through the quiet neighborhood, he found himself thinking about all the tours, all the performances, all the times he'd stood in front of thousands of screaming fans and felt invincible. The Bee Gees had conquered the world. They'd survived the disco backlash, reinvented themselves, written songs that had become the soundtrack to millions of lives. And what did he have to show for it now? Awards gathering dust, memories that hurt too much to revisit, a silence so profound it felt like drowning. He stopped at a small park, watching children play on the swings while their parents sat on benches, chatting and laughing. Ordinary life, uncomplicated. He wondered what that felt like, to exist without the weight of legacy, without the constant reminder of what you'd lost. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it. It was from his manager, asking if he'd thought any more about the charity event in Los Angeles. They wanted him to perform, to say a few words. It was for a good cause, music education for underprivileged kids. The old Barry would have said yes immediately. Music was meant to be shared, to heal, to connect people. But this Barry, this version who could barely get through a day without breaking down, he didn't know if he had anything left to give. He sat on a bench, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Linda had loved sunsets. She'd made him stop whatever he was doing to watch them together, insisting that beauty should never be rushed past. "I don't know how to do this without you," he whispered to the empty air. "Any of you." The sunset offered no answers, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Barry sat there until the colors faded to purple, then to the deep blue of early evening. Finally, he stood and began the walk back home. The house was still too quiet when he returned. Stephen had left a note saying he'd come by tomorrow. The music room door stood open, the piano waiting like an old friend who'd been patient long enough. Barry stood in the doorway for a long moment, then slowly walked to the piano bench and sat down. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. He pressed down on middle C, letting the note ring out in the empty room. It was just one note, but it was a start. Natur Chapter 2, Echoes of the Past. The Los Angeles hotel room was impersonal in the way all luxury hotels were. Expensive furniture that no one had chosen with love, art on the walls selected by committee, everything designed to be impressive and forgettable at the same time. Barry stood at the window, looking out over the sprawling city as morning traffic began to clog the highways below. He'd agreed to come for the charity event, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe Stephen was right. Hiding from the world wasn't the answer. Maybe getting back on stage, even for one night, would remind him of who he used to be. Or maybe it would just prove how thoroughly that person was gone. There was a knock at the door. Barry turned from the window, checking his watch. 10 in the morning. That would be Marcus, his manager, probably ready to go over the schedule for the 100th time. "Come in," Barry called out. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Danny, his old sound engineer from the Bee Gees' final tours. Danny had to be in his 60s now, his dark hair gone completely grey, but his smile was the same warm, genuine expression Barry remembered. "Danny," Barry said, surprised. "I didn't know you were going to be here." "Couldn't miss it," Danny said, stepping into the room. "When I heard you were actually performing, I had to see it for myself. Plus, they needed someone who knows how you like your sound mixed." He paused, studying Barry's face. "How are you doing, mate?" It was the same question everyone asked, but when Danny said it, Barry knew he actually wanted to know. "I'm here," Barry said, which was the most honest answer he could give. Danny nodded, understanding the things Barry couldn't say. "That's something. That's more than anyone expected, if I'm being honest." They stood there for a moment, the weight of shared history hanging between them. Danny had been there for all of it. The comeback tours, Robin's declining health, Maurice's sudden death. He'd seen the Bee Gees at their highest and their lowest. "I've been thinking about the Brisbane show," Danny said suddenly. "Remember, 1989? The One for All tour. It was pouring rain, the equipment kept shorting out, and Robin had laryngitis." Barry smiled despite himself. Maurice did that ridiculous impression of Rod Stewart between songs to buy Robin time to rest his voice. "No, and you harmonized with yourself for half the set because Robin could barely whisper," Danny laughed. "But you pulled it off. You always pulled it off." "We pulled it off," Barry corrected quietly. "We, not me." Danny's expression grew serious. "Barry, I know you think the music died with them, but I was there in that booth for every show, every rehearsal. You want to know what I heard? I heard 3 incredibly talented musicians who pushed each other to be better. But I also heard you, your voice, your arrangements, your vision. That didn't die. It's still in you." Barry walked back to the window, trying to process Danny's words. "I don't feel it. When I sit down to write, all I hear is silence. Or worse, I hear them so clearly it's like they're in the room with me, but when I reach out, there's nothing there. Maybe that's because you're reaching for them instead of reaching for yourself," Danny suggested gently. "The music you made together was incredible, but you had a voice before the Bee Gees, and you have one after." Before Barry could respond, his phone rang. It was Marcus, finally calling to discuss the evening's arrangements. Barry held up a finger to Danny and answered. The conversation was brief. Sound check at 4, event starts at 7. Barry would perform 3 songs and say a few words about music education. Simple, straightforward, terrifying. When he hung up, Danny was examining the set list that had been left on the table. "How Deep Is Your Love?" "To Love Somebody," and "Massachusetts," Danny read aloud. "Good choices, though I half expected them to ask for Stayin' Alive." "I told them no disco," Barry said firmly. "I can't. Those songs belong to a specific time, to the 3 of us together. I can't do those alone." "Fair enough," Danny said. "These 3 are beautiful, emotional, but not overwhelming. You can do this, Barry." "Can I?" Barry sat down on the edge of the bed. "What if I get up there and just freeze? What if I open my mouth and nothing comes out?" "Then you'll have a very awkward silence and we'll all move on," Danny said with a slight smile. "But that's not going to happen. You know why? Because when you get on that stage, muscle memory's going to kick in. Your body knows how to do this. Your voice knows how to do this. You've done it 10,000 times. Never alone," Barry said quietly. "You're not alone," Danny insisted. "You've got me running sound. You've got Stephen in the audience. You've got a whole room of people who love what you've created and want to support you." He paused. "And whether you believe it or not, you've got Morris and Robin with you too. Not in the way you want, but in every note you've ever sung, every song you've ever written. They're in your voice, mate. They always will be." Barry felt his eyes burning but refused to cry. He'd done enough of that in the past months. "There's something else," Danny said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but I found it when I was going through old equipment cases last month. It's from Robin." Barry took the paper with shaking hands. It was a note written in Robin's distinctive scrawl, dated just a few months before he died. "Danny, if anything happens to me, make sure Barry keeps singing. He'll want to stop, he'll think it's over, but you have to remind him that the music is bigger than any of us. It's what we leave behind. It's how we stay alive. Don't let him forget that." Barry had to sit down. He read the note 3 times, hearing Robin's voice in every word. "He knew," Barry whispered. "He knew how I'd react. He knew you better than anyone except Maurice and Linda," Danny said. "And he was right, wasn't he? You did want to stop. You did think it was over." "It feels over," Barry admitted. "But it isn't," Danny said firmly. "Tonight is proof of that. You're here. You're going to sing. And maybe it won't feel the same. And maybe it won't be easy. But you're going to do it anyway. Because that's what Robin asked you to do. That's what the music asked you to do." Barry folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet, right next to a photo of Linda from their wedding day, and a picture of the 3 Gibb brothers from their childhood in Australia. "I should probably eat something before sound check," Barry said, standing up. "Now you're talking sense," Danny grinned. "There's a decent cafe downstairs. My treat." As they left the hotel room, Barry felt something shift slightly inside him. Not hope, exactly. That still felt too far away. But maybe acceptance. Acceptance that this was his reality now, and he could either let it destroy him or find a way to move through it. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, tourists and business people grabbing quick meals between meetings. Danny ordered for both of them, remembering without asking that Barry preferred his coffee black and his eggs scrambled. "You know what I miss most," Barry said suddenly, watching the steam rise from his coffee. "The arguments. Maurice and I used to fight about the stupidest things. Tempo, key changes, whether a bridge was necessary. Robin would usually take Maurice's side just to annoy me, but it was how we worked. Through conflict and compromise, we'd find something better than any of us could have created alone. So, find that again," Danny suggested. "Not with them, obviously, but with other musicians. Collaborate, write with other people." Barry shook his head. "I don't know if I can trust my instincts anymore. What if without them to challenge me, I just create mediocre rubbish?" "Then you create mediocre rubbish and learn from it," Danny said pragmatically. "Barry, you're not going to recapture what you had with the Bee Gees. You can't. But that doesn't mean you can't create something new, something different, something that matters." Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Barry found he was actually hungry, which was a change from the past months when food had seemed like just another necessary chore. "Tell me about the kids who'll be at the event tonight," Barry said. "The ones who'll benefit from this program." Danny pulled out his phone, showing Barry pictures and profiles. Children from South Central LA, from East LA, from underserved communities across the city. Kids who had talent but no resources, no instruments, no access to training. Barry studied each face, seeing in them echoes of his younger self, a kid from a working-class family who happened to find his voice and was lucky enough to have brothers who could harmonize. This one, Danny pointed to a girl of about 14 with bright, intense eyes. "Her name is Maya. She's been teaching herself guitar using YouTube videos. The program is going to get her proper lessons and an actual quality guitar." "She's going to be there tonight?" Barry asked. "Front row, along with about 50 other kids." Barry nodded slowly, an idea forming. "I want to meet them before the performance. Is that possible?" Danny looked surprised but pleased. "I'll make it happen." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of sound checks and preparation. The venue was beautiful, an old theater that had been restored to its 1920s glory, all velvet and gilt and perfect acoustics. Barry stood on the stage during soundcheck, looking out at the empty seats, and felt the familiar flutter of pre-performance nerves. But there was something else, too. A sense of purpose, maybe. These kids would be sitting out there tonight looking up at him, seeing what was possible if you dedicated yourself to music. He owed them his best, regardless of his grief. At 6 o'clock, Danny brought the students backstage. They were nervous and excited, whispering among themselves, eyes wide as they took in the backstage area. Barry greeted each one, asking about their instruments, their favorite songs, their dreams. Maya, the guitar student, told him shyly that "How Deep Is Your Love" was the first song she'd ever learned to play all the way through. "It's a good one," Barry said warmly. "You've got excellent taste." As the kids filed into the theater, Barry felt some of his anxiety ease. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about proving he could still perform or honoring the dead or any of the other heavy reasons he'd attached to this night. It was about showing these young people that music could be a lifeline, a purpose, a way through the darkness. He could do that, even broken, even grieving, he could do that much. At 7 o'clock, the lights went down, and Barry Gibb stepped back onto the stage for the first time in almost a year. The audience erupted in applause, and for just a moment, standing in the spotlight with a guitar in his hands, he remembered what it felt like to be whole. Chapter 3. The performance. The spotlight was warm against Barry's face, almost uncomfortably so after months of avoiding public appearances. He adjusted the guitar strap on his shoulder and looked out into the theater. The audience was a mix of donors, music industry professionals, and the students sitting in the first few rows, their faces glowing with excitement. "Good evening," Barry said into the microphone, his voice steadier than he'd expected. "Thank you for being here tonight. This is a bit different for me, standing up here alone. I've spent most of my life sharing stages with my brothers, and later with my wife in the audience. Tonight I'm doing this without them, which feels strange, but I'm doing it for a reason." He paused, glancing at Maya and the other students. "Music saved my life when I was young. It gave me purpose, identity, a way to connect with the world. I want to make sure these young people have the same opportunity. So thank you for supporting this program, and thank you for your patience as I figure out how to do this on my own." A warm applause rippled through the audience. Barry nodded his thanks and positioned his fingers on the guitar. "This first song," he said, "was written a long time ago, but it means even more to me now. It's about connection, about love that goes deeper than words. I wrote it with my brothers, performed it with them countless times, and tonight I'm dedicating it to their memory." He began the opening chords of "How Deep Is Your Love," and as his voice filled the theater, something remarkable happened. The years fell away. The grief didn't disappear. It would never disappear, but for these few minutes it transformed into something else, into a tribute, into proof that love persists even after loss. His voice cracked slightly on the first chorus, emotion getting the better of him, but he pushed through. In the front row, he saw Maya mouthing the words along with him, her eyes closed, lost in the music. That image steadied him, gave him something to anchor to. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Barry took a breath, wiping his eyes quickly before anyone could see. "Thank you," he said softly. "That one's always hard." He moved into "To Love Somebody," and this time his voice was stronger, more confident. He could feel Danny at the sound booth, making subtle adjustments, supporting him the way he'd done for decades. He could feel the presence of his family, Stephen out there somewhere in the darkness, and the ghosts of Maurice and Robin in every harmony line he instinctively reached for and had to adjust when they weren't there. But more than anything, he felt the music itself, the pure, undeniable force of it, the way a melody could carry emotion more powerfully than any words, the way rhythm could create a shared heartbeat between performer and audience. As he finished the second song, Barry realized he was smiling, an actual, genuine smile. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. "You know," he said, leaning into the microphone conversationally, "when I was about the same age as some of you in the front row, I was living in Brisbane, Australia. My brothers and I would perform at speedway tracks between races, trying to get noticed. We were terrible. Well, we thought we were brilliant, but looking back we were pretty rough around the edges." Laughter from the audience. "But we kept at it. We practiced constantly, drove our parents mad with the noise, annoyed our neighbors. Because we had this dream, this belief that music could take us somewhere beyond our ordinary lives. And it did. It took us further than we ever imagined possible." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But here's the thing I wish someone had told us back then. Success isn't just about fame or hit records or sold-out stadiums. It's about the connections you make, the people you create with, the moments when you get the harmony exactly right and you feel like you've touched something larger than yourself." He looked directly at Maya. "That's what I want for all of you. Not necessarily fame, but that feeling, that sense of purpose that comes from creating something beautiful. Because the world needs beauty, especially now. It needs your voices, your songs, your unique perspectives." Barry lifted his guitar again. "This last song is called Massachusetts. We wrote it in a hotel room in New York, feeling homesick for England, even though we'd left there years before. It's about longing, about searching for a place where you belong. I think we all feel that sometimes, that sense of being displaced, of looking for home." As he played the opening notes, Barry realized that he'd been searching for home ever since Linda died, maybe even since Maurice and Robin had gone. He'd been wandering through his own life, trying to find a place that felt right, felt safe, felt like it used to. But maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was this, the music, the connection with an audience, the act of creating something that moved people. Maybe home was something you carried with you, in your voice, in your memories, in the songs that refused to be silenced. His voice soared on the chorus, and for the first time since Linda's funeral, Barry felt something like peace settle over him. It was temporary, he knew. The grief would come rushing back the moment he stepped off this stage. But for now, in this moment, he was where he belonged. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet. Barry stood there, slightly overwhelmed, as the applause washed over him. He saw tears on faces in the audience, saw the students cheering wildly, saw Danny giving him a thumbs up from the sound booth. "Thank you," Barry said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for letting me share this with you. And to the students, keep playing, keep singing, keep creating. The world needs what you have to offer." As he left the stage, he was immediately surrounded by organizers, donors wanting to shake his hand, people offering congratulations. Barry smiled and nodded and said the appropriate things, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the note Robin had left with Danny, about the insistence that he keep singing, keep creating. For the first time, he understood what Robin had meant. It wasn't about clinging to the past or trying to recreate what they'd had. It was about honoring it by continuing to do what they'd always done, make music that mattered. Backstage, Stephen was waiting with a proud smile. "You did it, Dad," he said, embracing his father. "You really did it." "I did, didn't I?" Barry said, almost surprised by his own accomplishment. "It wasn't perfect, but—" "It was perfect," Stephen interrupted. "It was honest and real and exactly what everyone needed to hear." Danny appeared with a bottle of water, which Barry accepted gratefully. "The sound was good?" Barry asked, always the perfectionist. "The sound was brilliant," Danny assured him. "Your voice is still incredible, Barry. Still gives me chills." Before Barry could respond, one of the organizers approached with Maya and a few other students in tow. "Mr. Gibb, if you have a moment, these students wanted to thank you personally," she said. Barry crouched down slightly to be at eye level with them. "You don't have to thank me," he said warmly. "I should be thanking you. You reminded me tonight why I started doing this in the first place." Maya stepped forward shyly. "Mr. Gibb, I brought my guitar, the one I've been learning on. Would you maybe sign it?" She held out a battered acoustic guitar, clearly well loved despite its age and wear. Barry took it carefully, examining it. "This is a good guitar. You've taken good care of it." "I practice every day," Maya said proudly, "even when my fingers hurt." "And that's how you know you're serious," Barry said, pulling a marker from his pocket. "Maurice used to practice until his fingers bled, drove our mum crazy with worry." He signed the guitar, adding a small note. "Keep playing. The world needs your music. Barry Gibb." As he handed it back, Maya hugged it to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. And maybe it was, the bridge between where she was now and where she dreamed of being. "Can I ask you something?" Another student, a young man with a keyboard case slung over his shoulder, spoke up. "How did you keep going after your brothers died? How did you keep making music?" The question hung in the air. Barry could feel everyone waiting for his answer. Stephen, Danny, the students, the organizers. "Honestly," Barry said, "for a long time I didn't. I stopped completely. I thought the music died with them. But tonight, standing up there, I realized something. The music doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to everyone who's ever heard it, everyone who's ever been moved by it. And if I stop, if I let grief win, then I'm taking something away from the world that isn't mine to take." He looked at each of the students. "You're going to face losses in your life. Everyone does. You're going to have moments when you wonder if it's worth continuing, if you have anything left to give. And I can't tell you how to get through those moments. Everyone's path is different. But I can tell you this, the music will save you if you let it. It saved me tonight. It saved me more times than I can count." The students nodded solemnly, understanding perhaps more than Barry expected. As they filed away, still buzzing with excitement, Stephen put his arm around his father's shoulders. "You ready to head back to the hotel?" he asked. Barry glanced back toward the stage, visible through the wings. The lights had been dimmed but not turned off completely, leaving the space in a soft, ethereal glow. "Actually," Barry said, "I think I'd like to stay here for a few more minutes. Is that all right?" "Of course," Stephen said. "I'll wait in the lobby. Take all the time you need." When everyone had gone and the theatre had fallen quiet, Barry walked back out onto the empty stage. He sat down on the edge, his legs dangling into the orchestra pit, and looked out at the rows of seats. This was where he belonged, not hiding in his Miami mansion, not running from the memories. Here, where music lived, where it could still transform pain into something bearable. He thought about Linda, about how she would have loved tonight, how she would have cried during "How Deep Is Your Love?" and then scolded him for making her cry. How she would have insisted on meeting every single student personally. He thought about Maurice, who would have made some self-deprecating joke about the performance and then admitted grudgingly that it wasn't half bad. He thought about Robin, who would have critiqued every note but whose eyes would have shown pride. They were gone. That reality would never change, but they weren't erased. They lived in every song, every performance, every time someone played a Bee Gees record and remembered what joy sounded like. Barry stood up slowly, his knees creaking slightly, a reminder that he wasn't young anymore, that time had passed, whether he'd been ready for it or not. "Thank you for pushing me," he said to the empty theatre, to the ghosts of his brothers, to Linda's memory. "I needed this." As he walked off the stage for the final time that night, Barry realized something had shifted inside him. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it was no longer the only thing. There was also possibility. There was also purpose. There was also tomorrow. Chapter 4. Unexpected Collaboration. 3 weeks after the Los Angeles event, Barry was back in Miami, sitting in his music room with a legal pad covered in crossed-out lyrics. The piano had become less intimidating. He played it every day now, short sessions where he'd work through old songs or tinker with new melodies. Nothing serious, nothing he planned to record or share, just the act of creating for its own sake. The response to his performance had been overwhelming. Videos had circulated online, messages had poured in from fans, old and new, and several music publications had run features about his return to performing. But what affected him most were the handwritten letters from the students who'd been there that night, telling him how his words had inspired them. Maya had sent him a video of herself playing "How Deep Is Your Love" on her new guitar, one that the program had provided. She'd written in the accompanying note, "You were right. Music does save us. Thank you for not giving up." That phrase had stuck with him. Thank you for not giving up. As if continuing was a choice he was consciously making, rather than something he was stumbling through day by day. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Barry checked his watch. Noon. He wasn't expecting anyone. Stephen had mentioned coming by later in the week, and Marcus rarely showed up unannounced. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with Olivia Newton-John. "Olivia," he said, genuinely surprised. I know you weren't expecting me," she said with that warm smile he remembered from decades of friendship. "That's why I didn't call ahead. You would have told me not to come, and we both know I needed to come." She looked older, Barry noticed. Her blonde hair gone silver-white, but her energy was the same, vibrant, determined, compassionate. They'd worked together on and off over the years, particularly on the soundtrack for Grease, where Barry and his brothers had contributed. "Come in," Barry said, stepping aside. "Can I get you some tea, coffee?" "Tea would be lovely," Olivia said, following him inside. She looked around the house with knowing eyes. "It's too quiet here, Barry. When was the last time you had people over?" "Stephen comes by regularly," Barry said defensively, moving toward the kitchen. "That's not what I asked." They settled in the kitchen with tea, sitting at the same table where Linda used to do crossword puzzles in the morning sun. Olivia didn't waste time with small talk. "I'm working on a new album," she said. "Songs about survival, about living with loss, about finding joy in the aftermath. And I want you to write with me." Barry nearly choked on his tea. "Olivia, I haven't written for anyone else in years, and I'm not exactly in the right headspace for—" "That's precisely why you should do it," she interrupted gently. "Barry, I lost my sister to cancer. I've battled cancer myself 3 times now. I understand what it's like to stare death in the face and have to figure out how to keep living. That's what this album is about. And I think your voice, both literally and figuratively, needs to be part of it." "I don't know if I can write about that," Barry admitted. "Every time I sit down to write, it either comes out maudlin and self-pitying, or I can't write anything at all, because I'm too aware of trying to force meaning where there isn't any." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. "Then don't write about loss directly. Write about the moment after loss. Write about the morning you wake up and realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable of feeling something other than grief. Write about the resistance to healing and the slow surrender to it." Barry was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "I saw your performance in LA," Olivia continued. "I was in the audience, actually, though I left before you could spot me. I didn't want to intrude, but Barry, what I saw on that stage was someone finding their way back. Not all the way, not yet, but moving in the right direction. That's what I want to capture, that tentative, terrified hope." "Why me?" Barry asked. "There are dozens of songwriters who could help you with this, who aren't carrying around this much baggage." Because the baggage is exactly what makes you right for this," Olivia said. "I don't want some theoretical understanding of grief. I don't want someone who'll write pretty words about pain they've never actually felt. I want authenticity. I want truth. I want someone who understands that healing isn't linear, that some days you'll feel strong and other days you'll feel like you've made no progress at all." She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Inside were rough lyrics, song ideas, thematic notes about what she envisioned for the album. "Just look at it," she said. "No pressure to commit, but look at what I'm trying to say and ask yourself if you have anything to add to that conversation." Barry opened the folder, scanning the pages. One song title caught his eye: "Still Standing in the Light." The preliminary lyrics were about continuing to exist in a world that had fundamentally changed, about the quiet courage it took to face each new day. "I used to think courage was about big, dramatic gestures," Olivia said, watching him read. "Saving someone, sacrificing something, standing up to injustice. But now I know courage is much quieter than that. It's getting out of bed when you don't want to. It's answering the phone even though you know it's another condolence call. It's singing when your voice is breaking." Barry felt something stir in his chest. Not quite inspiration, but maybe its precursor. Recognition. The sense that Olivia was describing something he understood intimately. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," Olivia said, "but not for too long. We've all wasted enough time already, Barry. We're not getting younger and the music won't wait forever." She stood to leave, but Barry stopped her. "Stay for lunch," he said impulsively. "It's been too long since I've had a proper conversation with someone who understands this industry, this life. Please." Olivia smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." They spent the afternoon in comfortable companionship, sharing stories about the old days, laughing at remembered absurdities, carefully avoiding the topics that hurt too much. But eventually, as the afternoon wore into evening, the conversation turned serious. "Linda's death must have hit you hardest," Olivia said gently. "After losing Maurice and Robin to then lose your wife, Barry, that's almost unbearable." "It was unbearable," Barry corrected. "For months, I thought it actually was. I thought I'd reached the limit of what one person could endure and that I'd just stop. Not die, necessarily, but stop living in any meaningful way." "What changed?" Barry thought about the Los Angeles performance, about Maya's guitar, about the letters from students. "I don't know if anything changed exactly," he said slowly. Or maybe what changed was that I realized I could choose. I could choose to let grief consume me entirely, or I could choose to let it exist alongside other things. Joy, purpose, music. It doesn't erase the grief, but it makes it bearable. That's beautiful, Olivia said softly. Can you write that down? Exactly what you just said. Barry looked at her in surprise. You want to use that? I want you to use that. It's the heart of a song, Barry. That moment of realization that grief and life can coexist. That's what people need to hear. Almost without meaning to, Barry found himself humming a melody. Simple, plaintive, building slowly toward something more hopeful. Olivia's eyes lit up. That's it, she said. That's exactly it. Keep going. And just like that, they were writing, not forcing it, not overthinking it, just following the natural flow of melody and emotion. Olivia grabbed a pen and started jotting down lyrics as Barry played. I thought I'd reached the end of feeling, thought the silence was all I'd hear. But something in the morning whispered, you're allowed to still be here. They worked through dinner, ordering takeout that mostly went uneaten as they refined the melody, adjusted the lyrics, found the right key for Olivia's voice. It was the first time in almost a year that Barry had lost himself completely in the creative process. This is good, Olivia said finally, well past midnight. Barry, this is really good. Barry played through the song one more time, and for the first time, he could hear it as something separate from his personal pain. He could hear it as a song that might help someone else somewhere, facing their own unbearable moments. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll write with you. But I need you to understand. I'm going to have bad days. Days when I can't be creative, can't be inspiring. Days when the grief is too heavy. I understand, Olivia said. And on those days, we don't write. Or we write something angry or sad or honest. There's no timeline here, Barry. Just two old friends making music that matters. After Olivia left, Barry sat at the piano for a long time, playing the song they'd written. The moon was visible through the window, nearly full, casting silver light across the instruments and equipment that had sat silent for so long. He thought about the Bee Gees, about the years of collaboration with his brothers, about how they'd challenged and supported and occasionally frustrated each other into creating something better than any of them could have done alone. He'd never have that again. But maybe, just maybe, he could have something different. Not better, not a replacement, but something new. Something that honored the past while acknowledging the reality of the present. Barry reached for his phone and sent a text to Stephen. Started writing today, felt good, thought you should know. The response came almost immediately. So proud of you, Dad. Mum would be too. Barry set the phone down and returned to the piano. He played through the new song again, then transitioned into Massachusetts, then into an original melody that had been haunting him for weeks. The music flowed from one piece to the next, a conversation with himself, with the past, with the future. The Miami night settled around the house, warm and thick with humidity. Somewhere in the distance he could hear the ocean, its rhythm eternal and unchanging. And inside, in the music room that had been silent for so long, Barry Gibb played on into the early morning hours, remembering what it felt like to create, to hope, to believe that tomorrow might bring something worth singing about. Dewey, Chapter 5, The Studio Sessions. The recording studio in Santa Monica felt both familiar and foreign to Barry. He'd worked in hundreds of studios over the decades, legendary places like Abbey Road, intimate spaces in Miami, state-of-the-art facilities in Los Angeles. But this was the first time he'd entered one without Maurice and Robin being part of the plan, even in memory. Olivia was already there when he arrived, chatting with the engineer and setting up her station. She waved when she saw him, that easy warmth that had always made working with her a pleasure. "Good morning," she called out. "Coffee's fresh, and I brought those macadamia cookies you used to love." "You remembered," Barry said, genuinely touched by the small gesture. "Of course I remembered. Linda used to sneak them to you during recording sessions when we were working on the Grease soundtrack." Olivia's expression softened. "She was always looking out for you." Barry nodded, accepting a cup of coffee and one of the cookies. The taste brought back a flood of memories. Linda laughing at something Morris had said, Robin's concentration face as he worked through a difficult harmony, the electricity of creative collaboration. "You okay?" Olivia asked gently. "Yeah," Barry said, and was surprised to find it was mostly true. Just remembering, but not in a bad way. Not entirely, anyway. The engineer, a woman in her 30s named Sarah, approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Gibb, it's an honor to work with you. I grew up listening to the Bee Gees with my dad." "Please call me Barry," he said, shaking her hand. "And thank you, that means a lot. I've set up your preferred vocal mic based on what I could find in the archives," Sarah continued, her professional demeanor tinged with genuine enthusiasm. "But if you want to try something different, we have options." Barry followed her into the recording booth, examining the setup. Everything was positioned perfectly, thoughtfully. Sarah had clearly done her research. "This is excellent," he said. "You've got a good ear for detail." "I learned from the best," Sarah replied. "Danny Johnson was my mentor, actually. He told me you'd be working on this project and gave me about 3 hours' worth of advice on how to capture your voice properly." Barry laughed. "That sounds like Danny. Did he tell you about the Brisbane incident? With the equipment shorting out?" "He did, multiple times. The ice broken. They spent the next hour getting sound levels right, making sure everyone was comfortable with the technical aspects before attempting any actual recording. Olivia joined them in the booth for a few warm-up exercises, her voice as clear and strong as ever, despite her health battles. "You ready to try the first one?" Olivia asked, pulling up the lyrics to "Still Standing in the Light" on a music stand. Barry positioned himself at the microphone, headphones on, guitar in hand. He'd done this countless times before. It should have felt routine. Instead, his hands were trembling slightly. "Take your time," Sarah's voice came through the headphones. "No pressure to nail it on the first take." Barry nodded, took a deep breath, and started playing the opening chords. But when it came time to sing, his voice caught. He stopped, frustrated. "Sorry," he said. "Give me a moment." "All the time you need," Olivia said from her position at the second mic. Barry closed his eyes, trying to find the emotional center of the song. This wasn't about technical perfection. It was about truth, about acknowledging pain while not being consumed by it. He tried again. This time, his voice came through, wavering at first, but growing stronger as he moved into the verse. Olivia joined him on the chorus, her voice blending with his in a way that was complementary rather than trying to replace the harmonies he was used to. "I thought I'd reached the end of feeling, thought the silence was all I'd hear, but something in the morning whispered, 'You're allowed to still be here.'" When they finished, there was a moment of silence in the studio. "That was beautiful," Sarah said finally. "Really beautiful. But Barry, there's something in your voice, a hesitation on certain lines. What if we try it with you thinking about a specific moment, a specific morning when you made that choice to keep going?" Barry thought about it. There had been a morning, about 2 weeks after Linda's funeral. He'd woken up with the now familiar weight of grief pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He'd thought about staying in bed, about never getting up, about just surrendering to the pain. But then he'd heard birds outside his window. A simple sound, nothing profound, but they were singing like the world hadn't ended, like life continued whether he participated in it or not. And something in him had decided, not consciously, not dramatically, just decided to get up, to shower, to make coffee, to keep existing. "I've got it," Barry said. "Let's try again." This take was different, raw, honest, with his voice cracking in places, but not in a way that felt like failure, more like vulnerability, like truth. "Perfect," Olivia said when they finished. "Don't change a thing. That's the take." They worked through 3 more songs that day, each one excavating different aspects of loss and survival. By the time they broke for dinner, Barry was emotionally exhausted, but also strangely energized. "You're a natural at this," Olivia said over Thai food in the studio lounge. "I mean, I knew you were talented, but Barry, you're channeling something really special here." "It's strange," Barry admitted. "When I was with Maurice and Robin, we'd spend hours perfecting every note, every harmony. This feels different, more immediate, like we're capturing moments rather than constructing them." "Maybe that's what this project needs," Olivia suggested. "Imperfection, humanity, the sound of people actually working through their pain, rather than presenting a polished version of it." Sarah joined them, her laptop open to show waveforms of their recordings. "I've been thinking about the production," she said. "What if instead of layering everything heavily, we keep it sparse? Piano, acoustic guitar, maybe some subtle strings, but let the vocals be the focus. Let the emotion breathe." "I like that," Barry said. "The Bee Gees were always about the production. The big sound, the layers, the perfectionism. Maybe it's time for something simpler." "Simpler doesn't mean lesser," Olivia added. "Sometimes the most powerful songs are the ones that don't hide behind production tricks." Over the next 3 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Barry would arrive at the studio mid-morning, work through whatever song they'd planned for that day, break for lunch, then spend the afternoon refining and re-recording. Some days were harder than others. There were sessions where he couldn't get through a song without breaking down, where the memories were too fresh, too painful. On those days, Olivia never pushed. They'd switch to instrumental work, or they'd just talk. Or sometimes they'd call it early, and Barry would drive along the Pacific Coast Highway, letting the ocean breeze clear his head. But there were also sessions of pure, creative flow, where Barry felt connected to something larger than his grief, where the music felt like medicine, healing him from the inside out. About halfway through the project, Olivia brought in a string quartet to record on several tracks. Watching them work, Barry was struck by how young they were, probably in their late 20s, full of enthusiasm and talent. "You know what's funny?" he said to Olivia during a break. "We're creating this album about survival and aging and loss, and these kids are bringing so much life and energy to it. It's like the whole project is about that tension between what we've lost and what's still possible." "That's exactly what it's about," Olivia agreed. "You can't have wisdom without experience, and you can't have experience without time, and time inevitably brings loss, but it also brings new connections, new collaborations. Like this one. One afternoon, Sarah asked if she could share some of the rough mixes with her father, the one who'd introduced her to the Bee Gees music. "Of course," Barry said. "What does he do?" "He's a hospice nurse," Sarah replied. "He works with terminal patients, helps them and their families through the end-of-life process. I think this music might really speak to them." The comment stayed with Barry. He'd been so focused on his own grief, his own loss, that he hadn't fully considered how these songs might reach other people in their darkest moments. The idea was both humbling and energizing. "Would your father be willing to come to the studio?" Barry asked suddenly. "I'd like to meet him." Sarah looked surprised but pleased. "I'm sure he would. He'd be honored." 2 days later, Sarah's father Mark arrived during a session. He was a tall man in his 50s, with kind eyes, and the sort of calm presence that probably served him well in his work. "Mr. Gibb," Mark said, shaking Barry's hand firmly, "thank you for agreeing to meet me. Your music has been the soundtrack to so much of my life." "Thank you for the work you do," Barry replied. "Sarah told me about your profession. That must be incredibly difficult." "It can be," Mark acknowledged, "but it's also deeply meaningful. You know, I often play music for my patients. Music can reach people when words can't. It can provide comfort when nothing else does." "What do you play for them?" Barry asked, genuinely curious. "Depends on the person. Classical for some, jazz for others. But quite often I play the Bee Gees. How Deep Is Your Love, especially. There's something about that song, it seems to transcend the moment, remind people of times when they felt connected, loved, whole." Barry felt his throat tighten. "Sarah played me some of what you're working on now," Mark continued, "and I have to tell you, this is music that's going to help people. Not just entertain them, but actually help them through the hardest parts of being human. That means more than you know, Barry said quietly. Can I ask you something? Mark said. In your experience, does making the music help? Does it ease your own grief? Barry considered the question carefully. It doesn't erase it, he said finally, but it gives it a shape, a form. When you're drowning in grief, it feels formless, overwhelming. But when you turn it into a song, you're creating a container for it. You're saying, this is what loss feels like, and here's proof that someone survived it long enough to write it down. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Mark said. That's what I tell families too. Create rituals, create markers, create meaning. It doesn't undo the loss, but it makes it survivable. After Mark left, Barry returned to the recording booth with renewed purpose. They were working on a song called Echoes of You, one of the most emotionally challenging pieces on the album. It was about the strange phenomenon of forgetting someone's voice, their mannerisms, the small details that made them unique, and the guilt that came with that forgetting. Barry had been struggling with the bridge, unable to find the right melody to match the painful honesty of the lyrics. But thinking about Mark's patience, about all the people facing loss and searching for comfort, something clicked. I've got it, he told Sarah. Can we try it again? This time, when he sang, he wasn't just singing for himself. He was singing for everyone who'd ever sat by a hospital bed, everyone who'd packed up a loved one's belongings, everyone who'd woken up to the realization that memories fade, no matter how desperately we cling to them. I'm forgetting how you laughed, the way you gesture when you spoke. These echoes of you are fading, and I'm terrified of letting go. When he finished, there was silence in the studio. Then Olivia walked into the booth and hugged him tightly. That's the one, she whispered. Don't change a single note. As the project neared completion, Barry found himself transformed by the experience. Not healed, he doubted he'd ever be fully healed, but changed. The act of creating this album with Olivia had shown him that life after loss was possible, that music could still flow, that connection could still happen. On the final day of recording, the whole team gathered to listen to the album from start to finish. Barry sat between Olivia and Sarah, headphones on, as their work played back. It was imperfect, which made it perfect. You could hear the grief in every note, but also the stubborn persistence of hope. It sounded like what survival actually felt like, not triumphant or neat, but honest and hard-won. When the last song faded out, no one spoke for a long moment. We did something important here, Olivia said finally. Something that's going to outlive all of us. Barry nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. For the first time since Linda's death, he felt proud of something he'd created. Not proud in an egotistical way, but proud in the sense that he'd taken his pain and transformed it into something that might ease someone else's. As they packed up to leave, Sarah pulled Barry aside. My father wanted me to give you this, she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Barry, thank you for trusting your grief enough to share it. You've created something that will bring comfort to countless people facing the darkest moments of their lives. That's not just artistry. That's grace. Please take care of yourself and know that this work matters more than you probably realize. Mark. Barry folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet, next to Robin's note and the picture of Linda. Tell your father thank you, he said to Sarah. And thank you too, for everything. As he drove home to Miami that evening, watching the sun set over the Pacific, Barry allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Chapter 6, Public Return. The announcement that Barry Gibb would be performing at the Grammy Awards came as a surprise to almost everyone, including Barry himself. He'd been working quietly with Olivia on the album, staying mostly out of the public eye, when his manager Marcus called with the opportunity. They want to do a tribute segment, Marcus had explained, celebrating the legacy of the Bee Gees, but also acknowledging your work now. They're proposing you perform Still Standing in the Light from Olivia's album. and then transition into one of the classics. They're talking about having a full orchestra, maybe some guest performers to join you. Barry's first instinct had been to refuse. The Grammys were high pressure, high profile, millions of people watching, expectations sky high, the weight of legacy and memory hanging over everything. But then he'd thought about Maya and the other students from the Los Angeles event. He'd thought about Mark's patience, about everyone facing their own unbearable losses. If this performance could reach even a fraction of those people, didn't he owe it to them to try? "Let me think about it," he'd said. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now he was in Los Angeles again, backstage at the Staples Center, waiting for his turn. The scale of the production was enormous. A full orchestra, a choir, elaborate staging. They'd arranged for several artists to join him for the classics medley. Olivia, of course, but also some younger performers who'd cited the Bee Gees as influences. Stephen was with him in the dressing room, helping him adjust his tie for the third time. "Dad, you look fine," Stephen said gently. "Stop fidgeting." "I'm not fidgeting," Barry protested, even as his hands moved to straighten his collar again. "I'm just making sure everything's right." "Everything is right. You sound incredible in rehearsal. The arrangement is beautiful. You're going to be amazing." Barry sat down heavily on the couch. "What if I freeze up there? What if I start and can't finish? What if—" "Dad," Stephen interrupted, crouching down in front of his father. "Listen to me. You've performed for millions of people over the course of your career. You've played some of the biggest venues in the world. This is no different." "It is different," Barry said quietly. "Every other time, I had them with me, Maurice and Robin. We were a unit. Now I'm just me." "You're not just anything," Stephen said firmly. "You're Barry Gibb. You wrote some of the most iconic songs in pop music history. You have one of the most distinctive voices in the industry. And more importantly, you have something to say that people need to hear. That's why you're here." A knock at the door interrupted them. Danny Johnson poked his head in. "Sound checks in 5, he said, then stepped inside fully. "How are you holding up?" "Terrified," Barry admitted. "Good," Danny said, surprising him. "If you weren't scared, I'd be worried. Fear means you care. Fear means it matters." "Very philosophical of you," Barry said with a weak smile. "I learned from the best," Danny replied. He pulled out his phone and showed Barry a photo. It was Robin, backstage at some long-ago concert, looking nervous despite his confident stage persona. "Your brother used to get stage fright before every show, every single one. He'd pace around, second-guessing everything. Then the curtain would go up, and he'd be brilliant." Barry took the phone, studying his brother's face. He'd forgotten that about Robin, the pre-show anxiety that would evaporate the moment he stepped into the spotlight. "Thank you for this," Barry said, handing the phone back. "We're all rooting for you out there," Danny said. "Not just me. Everyone who's ever worked with you, everyone who's ever been touched by your music. You've got a whole army of support. You're not alone." The sound check went smoothly, though Barry could feel his nerves building with each passing minute. The orchestra was incredible, the arrangement sophisticated yet emotionally resonant. Olivia ran through her parts flawlessly, as did the other guest performers. "Places in 10 minutes, a stage manager called out. Barry returned to his dressing room one last time. He looked at himself in the mirror, a 78-year-old man who'd lived several lifetimes' worth of experiences, who'd reached heights most people could only dream of, and suffered losses that had nearly destroyed him. He thought about Linda, about how she'd always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. He thought about Maurice and Robin, about the music they'd created together, the brotherhood that had defined his existence for so long. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered to their memories, "and for everyone who needs to know that you can survive losing everything." "Mr. Gibb," another knock. "You're on in 5. Barry took one last deep breath, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the stage. The Staples Center was packed, thousands of industry professionals and performers filling every seat. As Barry walked into position behind the curtain, he could hear the audience murmuring with anticipation. The lights dimmed. A video montage began playing on the large screens. Footage of the Bee Gees throughout the decades. Their early days in Australia, the disco era, later performances. Images of Maurice and Robin intercut with scenes of Barry on stage. The three brothers always together, always harmonizing. Barry watched from the wings, feeling the familiar ache of loss. But underneath it, he felt something else. Gratitude. He'd had them in his life. He'd made music with them. That couldn't be taken away, no matter what else had been lost. The video faded to black. A single spotlight came up on center stage, where a piano sat waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice filled the arena, performing Still Standing in the Light and a medley of Bee Gees classics, Mr. Barry Gibb. The audience erupted in applause. Barry walked out onto the stage, the sound washing over him like a wave. He sat at the piano, adjusting the microphone, waiting for the noise to subside. "Thank you," he said simply. His voice, amplified through the arena's sound system, was steady despite his nerves. "This first song is from an album I've been working on with my dear friend Olivia Newton-John. It's about survival, about learning to exist after loss. I hope it speaks to some of you the way creating it has spoken to me." He began playing, and the orchestra came in softly behind him. His voice, that distinctive vibrato that had defined the Bee Gees' sound, filled the arena. I thought I'd reached the end of feeling, thought the silence was all I'd hear. But something in the morning whispered, "You're allowed to still be here." Olivia joined him for the second verse, walking out from the wings to share his piano bench. Their voices blended beautifully, two survivors singing about the hard work of continuing. As they reached the bridge, the full choir came in, their voices swelling behind the lead vocals. Barry felt tears streaming down his face, but didn't try to hide them. This was honest, this was real. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, but Barry didn't pause to acknowledge it. He transitioned immediately into the opening notes of "How Deep Is Your Love," and the audience gasped with recognition and emotion. This time, several other performers joined him on stage. Younger artists who'd grown up with Bee Gees music, whose own careers had been influenced by what Barry and his brothers had created. They didn't try to replace Maurice and Robin's harmonies, but instead added their own interpretations, creating something that honored the original while acknowledging the present. The medley continued, snippets of "To Love Somebody," "Massachusetts," "Words," each song getting a moment to shine before blending into the next. The orchestra swelled and receded, supporting but never overwhelming the vocals. And then, unexpectedly, Barry heard something that stopped him cold. The orchestra had fallen silent, but the choir was still singing, and they were perfectly mimicking Maurice and Robin's harmony lines from the original "How Deep Is Your Love." Barry's voice caught, overcome with emotion, but he pushed through, singing the final chorus with the choir providing the harmonies his brothers had once sung. It wasn't them, it could never be them, but it was beautiful anyway. A tribute, an acknowledgement, a continuation. When the final note faded, Barry stood at the piano, tears streaming freely now as the Staples Center erupted in a standing ovation. People were crying in the audience. He could see them, moved not just by the performance, but by what it represented. The courage to continue, the resilience of the human spirit, the power of music to heal. Olivia embraced him on stage. The other performers gathered around, showing support and solidarity. The orchestra stood, joining the applause. Barry looked out at the sea of faces, at the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions of people around the world, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't the end of the Bee Gees' story. It was a new chapter, one written in solo vocals and unexpected collaborations, in grief acknowledged rather than hidden, in music that dared to be vulnerable. He raised his hand to the audience, a simple gesture of thanks, and the applause grew even louder. Backstage, after the awards show had ended, Barry was surrounded by well-wishers. Fellow musicians offered congratulations, producers talked about potential collaborations, journalists asked for comments. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. But the moment that mattered most came from an unexpected source. A young woman in her early 20s approached hesitantly, a security badge marking her as a production assistant. "Mr. Gibb," she said shyly, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to tell you something. My mother died last year, cancer, and I've been really struggling with it. But your performance tonight, what you said about being allowed to still be here, it's the first time since she died that I've felt like maybe it's okay that I'm still alive, still trying to have a life. So thank you. Thank you for putting that into words." Barry pulled her into a hug, this stranger who'd trusted him with her pain. "Your mother would want you to live," he said gently. "That's what love does. It wants the people it leaves behind to keep going, to find joy again. It's hard, and it's okay that it's hard, but it's also okay to keep living." The young woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll try to remember that." As she walked away, Stephen appeared at Barry's side. "That's why you did this," Stephen said quietly. "For people like her." "For people like us," Barry corrected. "We're all just trying to figure out how to keep going after loss. Some of us just happen to have a microphone to process it with." The drive back to the hotel was quiet. Barry was exhausted, emotionally drained from the performance and the evening's intensity. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from meaningful work rather than pointless struggle. His phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations from friends, reactions from fans, requests for interviews. He ignored most of them, but one made him pause. It was from Maya, the student with the guitar. "Mr. Gibb, I watched your performance tonight with my whole family. My abuela cried. She said she hadn't cried since my abuelo died, but your singing opened something up in her. Thank you for showing us that it's possible to survive losing the people we love. You're proof that we can make it through." Barry read the message 3 times, then showed it to Stephen. "This is what it's all about," he said. "Not the Grammys or the applause or the accolades. This, helping people feel less alone in their grief." "You did that tonight, Dad," Stephen said. "You really did." Back in his hotel room, Barry stood at the window looking out over Los Angeles. The city glittered below, millions of lives being lived, each one carrying its own joys and sorrows. Somewhere out there, the young production assistant was going home, maybe feeling a little less guilty about surviving her mother. Somewhere, Maya was practicing her guitar, inspired to keep creating. Somewhere, Mark was sitting with a hospice patient, perhaps playing "How Deep Is Your Love" and offering comfort in the darkest hours. The music continued, even after the musicians were gone. That was the legacy. That was what mattered. Barry picked up his phone and sent a message to Olivia. "Thank you for pulling me back into the world. Tonight meant everything." Her response came quickly. "You did the hard part. You chose to keep going. I just gave you a reason." Before bed, Barry pulled out his wallet and looked at the notes and photos he carried. Robin's message to Danny, Linda smiling on their wedding day, the 3 brothers as young men full of dreams. "We did good tonight," he whispered to them. "I hope you're proud." The silence that answered wasn't empty anymore. It was full of memories, full of music, full of the knowledge that love persisted even after loss. Barry fell asleep that night, not thinking about what he'd lost, but about what tomorrow might bring. It was a small shift, but it was enough. It was a beginning. Chapter 7. Coming Home. 6 months after the Grammy performance, Barry stood in the music room of his Miami estate, surrounded by moving boxes. He wasn't leaving. That had never been the plan. But he was clearing out, making space, letting go of the museum quality the house had taken on since Linda's death. Stephen was there helping, carefully packing away gold records and framed photographs, deciding what should be donated to music museums and what should be kept for family. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Stephen asked, holding up a platinum record for Saturday Night Fever. "Keep that one," Barry said. "Your kids should have it. But most of this stuff, it needs to be where people can appreciate it, not gathering dust in a house that's too quiet." They'd been working all morning, and Barry felt lighter with each box that was sealed and labeled. This wasn't about erasing the past. It was about living in the present. The doorbell rang, interrupting their work. Barry wasn't expecting anyone, but when he opened the door, he found Danny standing there with a familiar face. Maya, the guitar student from Los Angeles. "Surprise," Danny said with a grin. "Maya's here for spring break and she wanted to visit. Hope that's okay." "More than okay," Barry said warmly, ushering them inside. "It's wonderful. Come in, please." Maya looked nervous but excited, clutching the guitar case Barry had signed for her a year ago. "Mr. Gibb," she said formally, then corrected herself. "Barry, I wanted to show you something." They settled in the music room, now half-packed, but still containing the essential instruments. Maya pulled out her guitar and began to play. It was an original composition, clearly influenced by the Bee Gees' style, but with her own unique voice. The lyrics were about finding her identity as a first-generation American, balancing her family's Mexican heritage with growing up in Los Angeles. When she finished, Barry was beaming. "That's fantastic," he said sincerely. "The melody is strong, the lyrics are honest. How long have you been writing?" "Since that night at the charity event," Maya admitted. "You said music could save us. I was going through a hard time with my family, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. Writing songs helped me work through it." "That's exactly what it's for," Barry said. He picked up his own guitar. "Can I show you something? A trick we used in the Bee Gees for making harmonies sound fuller when you're performing solo." For the next hour, Barry worked with Maya on her song, showing her techniques, suggesting slight adjustments, teaching her from decades of experience. It felt natural, purposeful, not trying to recreate what he'd had with his brothers, but creating something new. Danny watched with satisfaction, occasionally offering technical suggestions. Stephen joined them, adding his perspective from working in the industry. It became a collaborative session, 4 generations of musicians learning from each other. "You know what you should do?" Barry said to Maya. "Apply for Berkeley or one of the other music schools. Get formal training to complement your natural talent." "I don't think my family could afford that," Maya said quietly. "There are scholarships," Barry insisted. "And if there's a gap, well, let's just say I know some people who believe in investing in young talent." Maya's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely, but you have to promise me something. You'll keep writing, keep creating, keep being honest in your music. Don't let anyone convince you to be something you're not." "I promise," Maya said, tears in her eyes. After they left, Barry returned to the packing with renewed energy. He was discovering that letting go of physical objects didn't mean letting go of the memories attached to them. The memories lived in him, in the music, in the way he could now help someone like Maya find her voice. His phone rang. It was Marcus. "I've got some news," his manager said. "The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wants to do an expanded Bee Gees exhibit. They want your input on what should be included, and they want to know if you'd be willing to do some interviews for the audio tour." A year ago, Barry would have said no. The thought of excavating all those memories, of reliving the highs and lows, would have been too painful. But now, "I'll do it," he said. "But I want to include the context, not just the success, but the struggles, the brotherly conflicts, the career setbacks, the personal losses. I want it to be honest." "I think they'd appreciate that," Marcus said. "It makes the success more meaningful when you understand what it cost." After hanging up, Barry sat down at the piano. He'd been working on a new song, something different from the work with Olivia. This was more personal, more reflective, a song about brotherhood, about the peculiar alchemy that happened when siblings made music together. He played through what he had, listening critically. It was good, but something was missing. A harmony line, maybe. The way Robin would have added a counter melody that elevated the whole piece. Barry picked up his phone and called a musician he'd met at the Grammys, a younger artist who had an interesting voice and had expressed interest in collaborating. "James, it's Barry Gibb. Listen, I'm working on something and I could use your ear on it. Any chance you're free this week?" The collaboration was set. More music to create, more connections to make, more reasons to keep going. That evening, Barry took a walk along the beach near his house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. He thought about Linda, about how she'd insisted they never miss a sunset. He'd been honoring that lately, making a point to stop whatever he was doing and watch the day end. As he walked, he encountered an older couple sitting on a bench, holding hands and watching the waves. They looked up as he passed. "Barry Gibb?" the man said, surprised. "I thought that was you." "Guilty," Barry said with a smile. "We saw your performance at the Grammys," the woman said. "It was beautiful. We lost our son last year, and your songs, they've helped us more than you probably know." Barry sat down beside them. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Losing a child, I can't imagine anything harder." "It's been the worst year of our lives," the man admitted. "But your music reminds us that we can survive it, that we're supposed to survive it." They talked for a while, sharing stories about grief and healing, about the particular pain of losing family, about the small daily victories of choosing to keep going. When Barry finally said goodbye and continued his walk, he felt grateful for the encounter, another reminder that the music mattered beyond entertainment. Back home, he found Stephen had finished most of the packing. "I saved this for you to decide on," Stephen said, holding up a photo. It was from the last concert the three brothers had performed together, taken backstage right before they went on. They had their arms around each other, smiling despite the tension that had existed between them at times. Barry took the photo, studying it carefully. "Frame it," he said, "but not in here, in the living room where I'll see it every day. I don't want to worship the past, but I don't want to forget it either." "That sounds healthy," Stephen said approvingly. "I'm trying," Barry admitted. "Some days are easier than others, but I'm trying." That night, Barry sat in the music room one last time before the renovation began. Tomorrow, workers would come to update the space. Better acoustics, new equipment, a more open layout that would accommodate collaborating with other musicians. The shrine quality would be gone, replaced with something functional and forward-looking. He thought about the journey of the past year. The absolute devastation of losing Linda so soon after his brothers. The months of paralysis, of not being able to create or connect or even get out of bed most days. The slow, painful emergence into something like life again, catalyzed by that first performance in Los Angeles. The work with Olivia had shown him he could still create meaningful music. The Grammy performance had shown him he could still reach people, still offer something valuable. Meeting Maya had shown him that legacy wasn't just about past achievements, it was about investing in the future. Barry picked up his guitar and played through the new song he'd been working on. It was coming together, taking shape, becoming something he was proud of. Not a Bee Gees song, not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new, something that could only exist because he'd survived losing everything. His phone buzzed with a message. It was from Olivia. "The album drops tomorrow. Nervous and excited. Thank you for trusting me with your grief." Barry smiled and typed back, "Thank you for showing me there was still music left in me. Whatever happens, we made something important." As midnight approached, Barry stood at the window, looking out over the moonlit ocean. Somewhere out there, Maya was practicing her guitar. Mark was sitting with dying patients, offering comfort. The young production assistant from the Grammys was living her life, maybe a little less burdened by survivor's guilt. Danny was probably tinkering with audio equipment, preparing for the next session. And here he was, Barry Gibb, the last surviving BG, still standing, still creating, still finding reasons to wake up each morning. The grief hadn't gone away. It would never go away. But it had become something he could carry alongside other things: joy, purpose, hope, music. The silence that had terrified him for so long didn't seem as threatening anymore, because it wasn't really silence. It was the space between notes, the breath before singing, the pause that made the music meaningful. Barry sat back down at the piano and played into the early morning hours, not because he had to, not because anyone was expecting it, but because he wanted to. Because the music still flowed, because he still had things to say, because tomorrow was coming whether he was ready or not. And for the first time in a long time, Barry Gibb was ready. Ready to create, ready to connect, ready to live. The sun would rise in a few hours, bringing another day of challenges and possibilities. But tonight, in this moment, surrounded by the instruments that had been his constant companions through every phase of his life, Barry felt something he'd been afraid he'd never feel again. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the coexistence of pain and purpose. Not the erasure of memory, but the integration of past and present. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of learning to live with it. He played one final song before bed, an improvisation that blended elements of How Deep Is Your Love with the new melody he'd been working on, creating a bridge between who he'd been and who he was becoming. When the last note faded, Barry stood and turned off the lights in the music room. Tomorrow, the renovation would begin. Tomorrow, the album would be released. Tomorrow, life would continue its relentless forward march. But tonight, Barry Gibb faced the silence after losing everything he loved, and discovered that the silence wasn't empty after all. It was full of possibility, full of music yet to be written, full of tomorrow. The end